Hey guys, it's me, Halloween Dan. Doing a video today that is really one of my favourite kind of videos to do, and I haven't done one of these for quite some time. And that's where I talk about one of my favourite subjects, the paranormal. Oh. Sorry in advance if this isn't your favourite kind of thing or you don't believe in the paranormal and stuff. It's just, I kind of do. I kind of really enjoy this sort of stuff, and this isn't just me talking about ghosts and ghost stories. This is something actually that happened to me. This is my ghost story. Now, if you've been with this channel for any length of time at all, you will have possibly seen this ghost story because I have told this story before. But if you did see this story, you and 24 other people, then you are really in the minority. And I just felt like the first time I told this story, I didn't do it justice. I didn't really tell the story how it deserved to be told. It did really happen. This really happened to me. It's not some random story that I've read online or something else like that. This is something that happened to me, and to this day, I can't explain it. Now, just as a little bit of backstory to this story before we get into the story. My ghost story began in the shop that I still work at now. I work for a very old hardware store that has been in the village I live in for over 140 years. And for this particular period of time, when this particular story happened about 11 years ago, we were still in a very old building where the shop had originated. The physical building was over 300 years old, and it was a bit creepy, and weird things occasionally would happen. So this is that story, and I hope you stay and listen. When you work in a shop that's over 140 years old, that resides within a building that's more than 300 years old, you're bound to hear the occasional ghost story. It's just what happens in old buildings. By the time I'd worked for this particular business for more than 9 years, I'd heard them all. Everything from disembodied voices, taps and strange noises, to full-blown figures. Every kind of paranormal cliche you can imagine had taken place in this store. It was so supposedly haunted that even the owner, whose family business owned the business, wouldn't lock up at night on his own. Though I'd heard the stories, and I enjoyed listening to the stories, I myself had never experienced anything strange. The shop actually was quite a nice place to work. I liked its weird, eerie atmosphere, and nothing strange had really ever happened to me, so I was more than comfortable there. But there was one corner of the shop that gave me the heebie-jeebies, and that was the attic. Everyone knows that attics are creepy, but this attic had something else. It had been left untouched for about 300 years and was used as a storage area for bits of old stands and items of stock that were too big to keep on the shop floor. Sat on the third level of the building, the attic was divided into 3 rooms and accessed via a private landing that was shut off from the rest of the shop, and a creepy half-spiral staircase that creaked incredibly loudly with every footstep you placed upon it. Unfortunately for me, this was an area of the shop that I often had to visit, at least 2 or 3 times a day, as certain items of stock that I looked after, in this case power tools, resided within the attic. So I often had to go up there, either to retrieve items of stock for customers or just to count stock so I didn't order something we already had. Over the years, I'd let it be known that I found the attic an incredibly creepy space. And at the time that this story takes place, there was another member of staff who enjoyed playing pranks on me. I enjoyed playing pranks on him too, but he was just better at it than I was. This is important to note only because it does play a role in what later happened. It was an ordinary day in the middle of the summer, and as I had had to many times before, I'd gone into the attic to count stock. This usually took no more than 20 minutes, so I was just about comfortable to stay up there that length of time. The problem with the attic was just that it was creepy. Nothing had ever happened up there to me except for maybe something falling over when it wasn't supposed to, perhaps. But it was dark and it was weird and it was old. And I always had this creepy feeling like I wasn't up there on my own, like I was being watched. Sometimes as you turned the corner into the attic from the staircase, you'd feel like you'd walked in on a party that you hadn't been invited to, and all the eyes of the guests were staring at you, wondering why you were there. It was truly a very odd space that I didn't really enjoy being in at all. But when you've worked at a place for 9 years, you kind of get used to that. You have to just deal with it. And on this particular day, that's exactly what I was doing. I was dealing with it. I was counting stock and minding my own business. But as I stood there counting items of stock, I heard a familiar yet unexpected noise from the landing below. The noise of footsteps. The building was so old that every single footstep a person took ended with a creak. So you knew when somebody else was present, ages before they even got to you. And on this occasion, that's exactly what I thought. Someone was on the landing down below the level of the attic, probably looking for an item of stock themselves. The footsteps were kind of slow and deliberate. Almost quiet, but not quiet enough. I didn't think much of it, in truth, and just carried on doing what I was doing. But then I heard a footstep on the staircase itself. Because I had to frequent the attic so often, you get used to the noises of the place. And I knew for certain that this step had taken place on the lowest step of the staircase that led into the attic. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's true. I could just tell that's exactly what it was. But there was something off about this footstep. There was something about its deliberate nature that made me listen a little bit more intently than I normally would. Usually, if someone was coming up to the attic to get me or to talk to me, they'd be quick about it. Rush up the stairs, each creaky footstep followed after the other until they finally arrived in the attic to speak to me. But on this occasion, that isn't what happened. The first step creaked under the weight of somebody, and then there was silence for a few seconds before there was another creak on the next step up. At first, I wondered why anybody would be creeping up these stairs, because that's exactly what it was. It was slow and deliberate. Somebody creeping rather than walking up the stairs. And then my mind immediately flashed to the other member of staff who enjoyed playing pranks on me. He knew as well as everyone else that I found the attic rather weird, and he was clearly trying to frighten me. Little did he realise just how creaky those stairs were. Nevertheless, I thought I'd play this game. I'd trick him back. He maybe thought he was going to scare me, but I was going to do my best to scare him. Pretending I hadn't heard the creaks on the stairs, I continued to count stock, all the while slowly backing myself towards the door that led to the staircase. As I backed backwards, I could hear yet more slow and deliberate footsteps on the stairs just beyond the attic. With adrenaline pumping, I began to try and think of a way that I could get this guy back. Nearby, there was a small canvas tool bag with nothing in it, which I slowly picked up as I began to back towards the doorway. The closer to the entrance to the attic I got, the louder the creaks on the stairs became. More and more deliberate with every single footstep. I was fully confident that at any moment this guy was going to jump out into the attic and try to frighten me. But I was going to frighten him first. You know when you just feel the presence of someone, you just know there's somebody there. I was so certain this guy was going to be there. I heard the final step creak, and I jumped out into the stairwell and threw the canvas bag. Probably not the best idea on a staircase, but in the moment it seemed like the right thing to do. But to my utter shock and surprise, the bag didn't hit the guy. It simply glided through the air down to the bottom of the staircase, not hitting anyone because the staircase was entirely empty. There was nobody there. I stood for a moment or two in bewilderment. It didn't make any sense that there was nobody there. I'd heard them coming up the stairs. I'd heard the footsteps on the landing below. There had to be somebody there. But the bag had clearly fallen flat at the bottom of the staircase. There was nobody on the landing below. It was very, very peculiar. And as I stood there in shock at this moment, the bottom stair suddenly creaked in a way like somebody had just lifted their weight from it. As that stair creaked in front of me, I felt my heart race, and I knew in that moment that I wasn't alone, that someone had been there on that staircase. It just wasn't the person I thought it was. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. I stood for a good 5 minutes, not sure what to do, but eventually I just knew I had to get out of there. I had to get down that staircase, no matter whether there was something there or not. I turned off the light to the attic and I rushed down the stairs creaking like they did under my feet. The landing was incredibly cold, colder than it probably should have been on a warm summer's day. And the other strange thing was that the door to the landing, which was a sliding door, had been slid shut. It wasn't locked, but it was shut, which was unusual because any other member of staff either would have locked it if they thought there was nobody in the attic, or would have left it open, assuming someone was in the attic. They wouldn't have closed it and not locked it. And I hadn't closed it because I always left it open when I was in the attic. I slid the door back open, slid it shut and locked it, and rushed back down into the shop where there were plenty of people around. I asked every member of staff, particularly the member of staff I thought had been trying to trick me, had they been up to the attic? Had they been on the landing in the last 10 minutes? Had they been trying to frighten me? Everyone said no. Everyone was busy either serving customers or bringing in new items of stock. They hadn't had time to come up to the attic to try and frighten me. So what then had I experienced? What was that? Now I know that as ghost stories go, it's probably not the most terrifying, and maybe even a little cliche. But I can genuinely tell you that in that moment, I was petrified. I'd never experienced something like that, where I was so certain that a person, a living, breathing person, was there, on those stairs, feet away from me. And yet, they weren't. There was nobody there. Was it my imagination? Was I overthinking? Was it just the creaks of an old building? I don't know. But having worked there for 9 years, I'd become accustomed to the sounds that building made. And it wasn't this. It wasn't the sound of very deliberate footsteps. That was not something I'd ever heard before. And I never heard it again. It was very frightening and very odd. And I didn't get over it for quite some time. I wouldn't go up into the attic on my own for quite a while after that. It really was quite strange. Secondary to this, a second little story, and I'll put the picture in a minute. Years later, when the shop was moving from one site to another and we were leaving this old building for the final time, we checked every corner of the shop to make sure there was nothing sort of we'd left behind. And one area of the shop that none of us had ever been to was the basement. There was an old basement that nobody ever went in, and there was nothing down there as far as we were aware. So we did venture down there just to see if there was anything worth hauling out in case we left something behind. We pulled up this old hatch in one part of the shop, and we all sort of scooted down there into the dark. And the room was horrible. It was filled with old bricks and piles of dirt, and it was just an old decrepit basement that probably hadn't been used since the 1800s. But I found it interesting, and at the time I was running the Facebook page for this particular company. So I started snapping a few pictures of the basement to put up on the shop's Facebook page. And a few days later, people started to say, "What's that face? Is that a carving? What is this face?" And at first I didn't see it until I really started to look at the picture. And what you see is in the top corner of the picture, sort of right in the centre, slightly to the right, is what looks like a glowing face. It's really peculiar it's kind of in a beam of light, and there is definitely what you can just about make out like 2 eyes, a nose, possibly a mouth. It's a very creepy, almost skeletal face. It's very, very strange. But stranger still is people said maybe it was the flash from your camera reflecting off something. But there were no reflective surfaces down there. It was literally just a basement filled with old bricks and mud. There was nothing for the light to reflect off. Then someone said, well, maybe it's a beam of light travelling in through a window or something. But again, it was a completely sealed basement. It didn't have any windows or any access to the outside. The only access was the trapdoor we'd entered through. And we were already many feet away from that when I took that picture, and I was aiming the camera in a completely opposite direction. I don't know. Maybe it's camera flare, maybe it's something else, I don't know. But it's very, very peculiar. And it definitely, the more you look at it, it looks like a face. A very creepy, skeletal face. But you decide. What do you think? I hope you've enjoyed this story. I know it's not the most amazing ghost story in the world, but like I say, it really did happen. It happened to me. It was something that I experienced, and I have no explanation for it. So maybe you do, maybe you don't believe in this sort of stuff. I'm sorry once again if this isn't your kind of video. I'm not going to do these on a regular basis, unless of course you like them. But it did happen to me, and I don't know. It's a mystery. Ooh. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Keep it spooky. Bye.